All right, so moving on to the last like set of palettes that I have. Everything else is like individual random palettes, but this is going to be by Artist Couture, and this is Mac Daddy's cosmetic line. And honestly, I used to love Artist Couture. This was his very first palette. This is called Midnight Maven, and I used to love this little palette. It was so cute, easy on the go. It has your, you know, everyday neutral shades that you can just wear all the time, and then it had beautiful bright pops of color, and I really love this palette. So yes, I am going to keep her. Then I actually have two palettes that are the exact same. This is the Artist Couture Caliente palette, and I have two of them. So one I purchased from his site, well, from Sephora, and the other one was a BoxyCharm exclusive. So I don't know that I've ever used either one of these, honestly, but the only difference is outside of the actual packaging. This one has the words on it, whereas the BoxyCharm one did not have the words on there. So that is really the only difference. They are the exact same shades and everything, but yeah, for whatever reason, when he did the BoxyCharm one, he did not put the shade names on. So I'm going to keep one and get rid of one. So yeah, that is that. I don't know which one I'm going to keep versus getting rid of yet, but I am going to keep one and get rid of one. And the next palette is going to be the Ariel Bloom palette. This one I have used like a handful of times. This was one of my favorite shades in here, Poppy, but to me this is really more of a like pastel-y type color palette, and I like it, but I don't love it. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and I think I'm gonna get rid of this one, and I think I still have the packaging for this, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. And the very last palette, look y'all, it's still in a box. This is the Supreme Bronze palette, and it looks like this. Only thing I don't like about his packaging is like handprints are super easily put on here, but this is what this one looks like. But this is a really beautiful like bronzy type palette. Everything is just a tad bit darker in person than on camera. Like again, the light is kind of watching it out, but I never ever reached for this palette. Haven't reached for it since I purchased it. Honestly, I don't think I've ever used this palette. So I know this one is discontinued. I think this one is discontinued, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of it because I don't use it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of it. So yeah, is a Sonia Kashuk palette. Y'all remember this palette? This is the Jewel of an Eye palette. I want to say this was a like holiday palette. I think it was discontinued. I'm not sure. These are really gorgeous like jewel tone shades. Again, the lighting isn't doing it any justice, but honestly I don't reach for this, so I'm gonna go ahead and just get rid of it because I mean I don't reach for this. So this next palette I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm not getting rid of. This was the very first Huda Beauty palette, if I'm not mistaken. This is the Textured Shadows palette, the Rose Gold edition. Y'all remember this? Listen, this was a thing, okay? Like I loved this palette. This top row had all those textury type eyeshadows that actually are still pretty usable, but I mean I probably won't be using it, but I really love this palette at that time. Again, these are all the shades I go for. It has this beautiful hot pink in here. It has this dark burgundy red, and honestly it had a lot of fallout, kind of dry as I'm swatching it now, but I love this palette. I did love it. I did use it a ton, so I'm not ready to get rid of her. I don't know that I'm going to per se use her anymore, but I still want to keep her. I used to have a few Huda palettes, but I just kind of got rid of them over the years because I didn't reach for them. I kind of went through a phase that I stopped reaching for really big palettes. So yeah, but I'm going to keep her. All right, so this next palette is going to be by Ace Beauty, and this is the Grandiose palette. I want to say this is a black owned brand, I think. And this is what the palette looks like. I want to say I've used this once, maybe twice. The shades are very, very beautiful and pigmented. As you can see, I did have a preference back in the day when I was, you know, having palettes. They all are very, very warm, dark red tone, bronzy type shades. So I mean, I have a bunch of these in my collection, so I don't really need this palette. It is nice and like travel size, but yeah, I don't need this, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this one. Next palette is the Celestial Thunder palette by Dominique Cosmetics, and this was a BoxyCharm exclusive. This was a like spin on her, you know, I forgot the name of it, but it's some other palette she has that's way bigger than this one. This is like the colors are cut down in half, but the shades in here are very, very gorgeous. And I think I'm going to keep this palette. It is a little unique to my collection. This orange is beautiful. It's a very pretty turquoise. This shimmer is really pretty, and you know I love me a good red burgundy shade. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and keep this palette. This palette looks like it's been through the storm. This is the Juvias Place Sahara palette, and honestly, I had never used this palette. My daughter got a hold to this when she was a little smaller and put her fingers all in this palette. So yeah, I don't really use this. The shades are really, really pretty, but I'm gonna go ahead and keep it. I'll probably just give it to her since she already stuck her little fingers in here. But yeah, it's a beautiful palette. I don't buy too many Juvias Place palettes. I think I only had 2 or 3, and this is the only one I have left. So yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and keep her. Next palette, this is going to be a very old Wet n Wild Walking the Red Carpet palette. Do y'all remember this? People were searching high and low for this palette. I ain't bought no Wet n Wild eyeshadows in years, but the quality of these particular palettes were really amazing. It is a really, really beautiful palette. I may have used this once or twice, but honestly, I don't reach for it, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one. This next palette, it has been in rotation for like 2 months now. I haven't put it down. This is going to be the Patrick Ta for Eyes palette, and I pulled the back so it won't blind you. This is the Major Dimension eyeshadow palette. This is the original one. I think he has 2. And this is what the palette looks like. Very much a beautiful neutral palette. Like, y'all can't see how beautiful it is, but I promise it is gorgeous, and I use it all the time now. I love this palette so much, and it doesn't get enough love. So I love this, definitely keeping. All right, y'all, this next palette, it gives me nostalgia also. I'm never getting rid of this. This is one of the first like collab palettes I want to say that I have, possibly. This is going to be a brand that is no longer in business. This is going to be the Manny MUA and Makeup Geek palette. Marla, I think during the pandemic something happened and her business just wasn't booming like it used to, so kind of went out of business, I guess. She may still have her site up because I know she was clearancing everything out, but this is the only palette I have left by Makeup Geek. Honestly, this is one of the best collabs I have outside of my Jackie Aina palette. This, like, I still kept the box because that's how I was. I just kind of kept the boxes of certain, you know, collabs. But this is the palette, and honestly, one of the most beautiful palettes ever. It was like one of the very first palettes I've ever seen with this particular shade. We all know this is kind of like a spinoff of MAC's Blue Brown Pigment, but this was one of the first palettes that actually had this in here. And y'all, this shade is still popping. This used to be one of my favorite shades. This was one of my favorite shades. And this, like, y'all, this palette, look at those shades. You cannot tell me that those shades are not popping. Like, this palette started my love for this color, and I just wanted all the palettes that had this shade in here. But this is one of the ones, the best ones to ever do it. And yeah, I'm going to forever keep this and cherish it. Marlena, we love you. And yeah, love this palette. All right, moving on. Just so happens this is Manny's best friend's brand, and this is Laura Lee. This is the Party Animal palette. I have no idea if this palette still exists, but it looks like this. It had these beautiful, very bright, bold shades in here, and I think at the time people just were not feeling Laura Lee, so no one, you know, people didn't really talk about it. They hated this little palette, but I got it in a boxy charm, and I just forever be keeping it. But honestly, I never reached for it, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. Next palette is by MAC, and this might be the only MAC palette I have anymore. I used to collect MAC eyeshadow. I used to do the individual eyeshadow, and I just don't do it anymore. I got rid of everything. So this is the only palette I have left, and I'm keeping this. This was a collab with Kabuki Magic from many years ago, 2016. That's when this came out, and this was the Shining Hour palette, and this is the Dazzle Shadows. And honestly, this is another palette that I really only got for this shade because it's, again, it's that blue brown like shimmer shade, and it's just like a light topper kind of. So I used to love pairing this over my Manny Makeup Geek palette and wearing this. So honestly, I'm not gonna get rid of this. I am going to keep this. And again, this is the Kabuki Magic quad. I have this random KAJA little stack, and it is the Chocolate Dahlia stack, and it comes with 3 shadows. I have used this maybe once. I never reached for it. I honestly only wanted it for this shade here, which I don't think I'm gonna get rid of it. I think I'm gonna just keep it for this shade and just start trying to use it, because look at that. I know my hands at this point are like super messed up from all shades I swatched, but it's really pretty. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep this little guy. These next palettes, a couple of these, I'm gonna try to run through these as best as I can because I know I'm getting rid of these. This one is going to be the Butter London palette. I never use this. It's just been sitting in my drawer for ages, and I'm gonna just get rid of this because I never use it. And I think I had only swatched like this shade with my hand, but I've never used it, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of it. It's really pretty though, and I know I'm getting rid of. This is the Studio Makeup eyeshadow palette. I've never used this. Kind of reminds me of like a cheaper version of the Urban Decay Naked palette, but I've never used that, so I'm gonna get rid of that. A lot of these kind of came in boxy charms, and yeah. This is going to be the Smashbox palette. This was the Cover Shot Ablaze eyeshadow palette. I used to kind of love this, again, in that like red brown type family, but I never use it. Never ever use it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. This is a Violet Voss Essentials palette. I have never used this. This is brand new, so this is also going to go. The shades in here are beautiful, but I have had so many palettes like this that I just don't use, and yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this one too. Next palette is by Dior, and this is the Dior Backstage eyeshadow palette. This one is 003 Amber Neutral, and yeah, no, not gonna get rid of this. I love this palette. I used to take this out of town with me, but it is again like an easy going like neutral palette. Some of my favorite shades in here, so definitely keeping. And you know Dior is expensive. Too Faced Forbidden Fruitcake palette. This came out either last year or the year before last for like Christmas. Yeah, I got this palette for this shade. Y'all know my love for the blue brown shade, so this is very, very similar. Nothing will ever beat that Makeup Geek one, but that is what I got this for, and I'm gonna just go ahead and keep it. I have been actually using this a lot lately, and keep this one. This I'm going to be getting rid of. This is the Pure Midnight Masquerade palette. This is one of those cheek and eyes palette. I have never used this. This was from a BoxyCharm. It is still in the paper and the packaging. The shades are really, really pretty, but I just don't need this. Also, I just don't really use stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this. Next one is another BoxyCharm palette, and it just says Hello Charmer. They did like a palette collab. I've never used this one. It's beautiful, but I have never used it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of it. It's a Eloise palette. Again, I used to get a ton of eyeshadow palettes from BoxyCharm, and sometimes I would use them and sometimes I wouldn't. But I had so many palettes of like similar things that I just didn't need to use all of them. But this is actually a really, really beautiful palette. I've never used this one, but it has some really, really beautiful shades in here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one because I don't need to touch or use a palette that, you know, I already have similar shades in my collection. So hope she finds a good home. All right, so we are down to the last 4 eyeshadow palettes. This next one is by Viseart, and this is the Neutral Mattes palette. And I bought this when BoxyCharm used to sell makeup. I haven't bought a BoxyCharm in years, so I don't know if they sell makeup anymore. But this is what it looks like, and this palette was actually really beautiful. I think I did use this. I think I have used this like once or twice. Very, very beautiful, very expensive palette, but I just don't reach for these, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this one. One more Zoeva palette, and this is the Matte Spectrum palette. Again, it's still in a box because I've never used her, and this is what it looks like. These, let me just take that paper off. These are the shades. Very, very beautiful. Again, brand new, never used, never swatched, never touched. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass her off to someone who will love her. So sorry, but this is going to be the Tati Beauty palette, and honestly I'm never gonna get rid of this. I love this palette. I love Tati. I always have loved Tati. You know, she had went through a lot, scandal and all that type of stuff, and you know, so Tati Beauty no longer exists, but this palette will forever exist in my collection. It was a very beautiful, like simple, easy reach palette. As you can see, I hit pan on the Matte Soothe, and I love this palette, so I'm never going to get rid of her. I will forever have her in my collection. So sad. Jaclyn Hill, which you know she no longer goes by, but this is the Morphe palette volume 2. I used to be a huge Jaclyn stan. Like, I loved Jaclyn. I bought every single collab she ever has done, like every collab, including all her palettes, highlighters, just everything. But over the years, I just don't love her as much as I used to. You know, she has had a lot of scandals and I'm just not a huge fan anymore. But I'm rid of every Jacqueline palette that I have ever had. All the Morphe collabs, her individual, you know, palettes from her brand. But this is the only one that seems to never make it out. And this one is beautiful. Like, I think she did a very, very beautiful job. I don't really collect big palettes anymore. I used to have a bunch of Morphe palettes, but I got rid of them because I just don't use them like that. But this one is beautiful. It has a bunch of pops of color. As you can see, I hit pan again on another shade. Y'all know this type of shade is my like everyday shade, but yeah, I'm actually not going to get rid of this one because I really do love it. I love the colors, and if I'm looking for a pop of color, this is the palette I love to go to. So yeah, definitely not going to go ahead and get rid of this, but I just wish she'd do better with herself. Alright guys, so that is it. These are the palettes I am getting rid of. I'm getting rid of 22 palettes, so I think I did pretty good. These are the two that I'm still unsure of, and then these are the ones that I am keeping. So I think I did a pretty good job. So thank you guys so much for watching. I know this is a pretty long video, but I really appreciate you guys, and stay tuned for more declutters because I got to get rid of some of this stuff, y'all. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye.